As the cultural shift continues to sway further and further right, we have entered into a period of unprecedented levels of utter disgustingness. We've entered a period of time where people's sole purpose is now to be as ugly and hateful and cruel as possible, especially to those that they're supposed to be caring for, as the left has decided to go absolutely batshit insane over anything that any conservative has to say. The left no longer has any values outside of opposition. Their only goal, their only purpose right now is to oppose and detract as aggressively as possible. They no longer have an ideology. They no longer have any principles. Their only goal in life is to be as oppositional and obstructive as possible. Their goal is no different than commonplace terrorism at this point in time. As time after time, as things are being put out there, as stories are coming out about things that the White House are proposing, the immediate response from sites like YouTube, TikTok, and X, and Blue Sky is to immediately go, no, you're lying, you're wrong about this, he was obviously conservative, all these other when we're looking at what we're looking at now, which is the Tylenol thing, the White House has come out and said that you should be careful about taking Tylenol during pregnancy because it leads to higher rates of autism. That's not a lie. It is an objective correlation that exists. Now, let's be very clear. It is a correlation, not a causation. And to be objectively clear, this is a source coming from Harvard. Harvard has put out an article. They have put out a meta-analysis study of a bunch of different studies on Tylenol use and neurological conditions and other birth defects. And what they found is that pregnancies that are heavily reliant on Tylenol do have a higher rate of ADHD, of autism, and of other abnormalities after birth. This is not a rumor. This is not a lie. The science suggests, of course, this is a correlational study. It's not scientific. They did not do any extreme testing. They didn't eliminate all of the confounding variables. This is just a correlational study looking for potential links. And there was a positive correlation between taking Tylenol while pregnant and having a baby with ADHD or autism. Objective truth. So, of course, liberals are reacting the exact way that you'd expect them to react, by filming themselves taking a lot of Tylenol. I watched a woman take more than you're supposed to take at any given moment. I saw a woman take 4 pills. I legitimately watched a woman overdose on Tylenol on TikTok because she thought it was funny and would own the conservatives. We live in an unprecedented period of evil. This is nothing but pure unadulterated evil, and it's disgusting. We have 2 different groups of liberals coming out. The first one saying, I won't listen to anybody who doesn't have a medical degree. So we won't listen to RFK Jr. Okay, you don't want to listen to him. Yes, he had brain worms, which was weird. He's got that voice thing, which is weird. But also, he didn't do the study. He's referencing a study done by Harvard. An objective study, meta-analysis of this drug. So a comparison of a lot of studies. So this he's taking the net value of a lot of studies, putting them into a group, and he's seeing the meta-analysis. RFK Jr. is not the one who invented this claim, and Tylenol themselves have on many occasions said, do not take Tylenol or any of our products during pregnancy, unless absolutely necessary. And if you look at the statement that Donald Trump had put out there, which we'll be getting to in a minute, he explicitly stated that it's okay to take Tylenol in extreme circumstances, but you should be careful about taking a lot of it because of the problems it has. And this isn't a new thing. A lot of medications, which were once seen as being very safe to take, have been correlated with high problems, such as Pepto-Bismol. And sometimes, as a pregnant woman, you have to take things that aren't healthy for the baby, occasionally. My twin sister could not keep any food down during her morning sickness period without Pepto-Bismol. Now, she didn't know she wasn't supposed to use Pepto-Bismol, and I think she used it once or twice after finding out she probably shouldn't. But that's something she had to do because it was the only way to sustain herself during the pregnancy. If you have to take the Tylenol for an extreme headache or for an extreme fever, they're not saying don't do this. They're saying be careful and use it sparingly. So before we go any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this disgusting story. Coming from the Daily Mail, pregnant liberals film themselves downing Tylenol despite autism warning. Pregnant women are now filming themselves taking Tylenol in defiance against Donald Trump's shaky claim, shaky as in he's not qualified. It says they're shaky without actually providing any reason to suggest it's shaky when it literally came from a study published by Harvard. Now, of course, that doesn't guarantee that's real. I'm fully aware of the authority fallacy. So for all we know, maybe the study's false. But on the chance that it isn't, why are you actively doing this if you know there's a very real chance you could be causing your child harm? And here's one video of a woman showing off 3 different bottles and taking more Tylenol than you're supposed to. Here's another pregnant woman showing herself taking Tylenol. Health Secretary RFK Jr. said that the evidence against using Tylenol is part of a new strategy aimed at informing doctors and families about potential risks. We will follow the science, restore trust, and deliver hope to millions of American families, he said in a statement released by the White House. Another mom to be named Natalie wrote on TikTok about take Tylenol for my headache while pregnant because I don't take my medical advice from a man who doesn't have a degree in science, healthcare, or medicine and who had a parasitic brain infection. Yes, RFK might be all those things, but what about the people giving him information? What about the people under him who are helping him to make these educated decisions? What about the Harvard study that found that Tylenol is correlated to pregnancy? What about Tylenol themselves admitting on multiple occasions that you should not be taking Tylenol if you are pregnant? And another person said that they believe that it causes more harm to tell women not to take Tylenol in case of the autism risk than it is to, not take Tylenol. She thinks that the risk of having a child with extreme autism is a better proposition than not taking Tylenol during pregnancy. And we're not talking about when it's medically necessary. It's for mild headaches that we're saying don't take Tylenol for. I mean, just look at this. This is a list of a bunch of different studies from a whole bunch of different places, all correlating Tylenol to an increase in neurological disorders, including things from the National Library of Medicine, from a pediatrics expose. These legitimate scientific organizations and medical organizations all pointing to the extremely prevalent risk. And both in 2017 and 2020, Tylenol themselves tweeted out, "We actually don't recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Thank you for taking the time to voice your concerns today." I mean, here's a collection of tweets from Stefani at Minority Home, who's showing off all these different women all just taking Tylenol because they have to own the conservatives. They have to own Trump. And it's totally worth it. But of course, there are a lot of other bigger issues than just the Tylenol. What's really needs to be focused on is the cultural issues. 2 things really to be focused on right now. The first one is the people calling genocide. You can't get rid of autism because that's discriminatory. You're committing eugenics. No, I'm sorry. As someone with ADHD, if we found a way to ensure that no future children had ADHD, we have a moral imperative to do so. If we could cure ADHD, we have a moral imperative to do so. If we can cure autism, we have a moral duty to ensure that nobody is born with autism, especially not extreme levels of autism. You want to allow for a high functioning? That's fine. If you're a high functioning person who's got some quirks, there's nothing wrong with that. But look at all of the people who are not high functioning. The majority of people with autism, well, first of all, a lot of people are getting diagnosed with autism who don't have it, who would not be impacted if we were to treat autism. That's another issue in itself. But the people who legitimately have autism, especially those with severe levels of it, we have a moral duty as moral people to cure it, to ensure that they do not suffer, to ensure that nobody is born with an inability to care for themselves. That is a moral good, to get rid of things like autism. And if you disagree, then you're lying to me, first of all. You're just straight up lying. Or you're so full into subjectivity that you are allergic to truth. Yes, a lot of great things came from autistic minds, but also a lot of people are really suffering because autism is something that isn't being looked at properly and isn't being treated. And to dissuade what some of the Tumblr users believe, autism isn't just quirky and you like Sonic. No, what autism really is, for most people, is an inability to care for yourself, an inability to speak, an inability to think properly, an inability to process information at an appropriate level, an utter inability to actually have social connections, to have meaningful connections. When RFK made those statements about the autistic people who will never live a fulfilling life, he wasn't talking about the people who you think of. He's talking about real autistic people who are legitimately suffering. And this quirkiness, this pathologization of normal behaviors has completely obfuscated what autism really is. And that in itself is a major issue that liberals refuse to discuss because it would harm their narratives. And that just gets back to the crux of the issue. Liberals no longer have any positions. They are no longer grounded in reality. They're no longer grounded in rhetoric. You cannot disprove a liberal anymore because they have no beliefs. The liberals' belief is whatever they believe to not be yours. So in a lot of times, liberals do end up actually agreeing with conservatives, but they will never admit to it because their goal is just to stand in opposition. When you look at people like Hassan Piker, like Destiny, like AOC, like Evan Loves Worf, and all these other people, Tyler Krasinski, I think is his name on X, all these people, all these left-wing pundits, they don't care about truth, they don't care about what's right, they don't care about social justice, they especially don't care about equality. No, all they care about is owning their opposition. They don't look at something as an exploration of truth, they don't look at things as an exploration of what improves society. All they care about is harming those they believe to be causing harm. Because they don't have standards, they don't have beliefs, they don't have faith, they don't have any level of education. Their only goal is to stand in opposition of progress. And I'm firmly believing that. I firmly believe that if Donald Trump came out tomorrow and said, we have a cure for world hunger, we can solve it right now, people would scream and throw a fit and cry that he's erasing the agency of Africans and South Americans and poor Asians who can't feed themselves. If Trump were to come out and say that he's cured AIDS, then all of a sudden gay activists would be saying that we've destroyed a cornerstone of gay history and that we should shame him for this curing. If he were to find a way to eliminate cancer, they'd come out here and they'd bash him for daring to compete with nature. I'm firmly convinced now that that would be what would happen. As they've celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, as they've cheered on the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, all because they don't want Trump to be the one to find a solution. These people pretend to have values because they think they do. They legitimately don't understand that they are people with no opinions and no beliefs. They don't understand that there are people hell-bent on nothing more than chaos and harm. And it is explicitly a consequence of the liberal mind virus. This is explicitly a leftist issue because they have banished objectivity, they have banished truth, and they have fully adopted postmodernism to the point that the only thing that matters is their subjective victimhood and their subjective identity. And that's all they care about. Because let's be honest, autism, ADHD, these things are blights. These things are problems. These are things that harm humanity as a whole. And so as thus, we have a moral imperative to cure them, to get rid of them if we can, to ensure that nobody should ever have to suffer with these disorders, even when people like me are quite happy with their disorders and have learned to channel them. I would admit that I would be willing to sacrifice my beneficial ADHD to help every single person harmed by it. But these people don't want that because that gets rid of their victimhood narrative, that gets rid of their privilege, that gets rid of all of their little weaponizations and their politicizations, and they ultimately oppose it exclusively because they know who's behind it. And what's worst of all, because these people do not believe in reality, they do not believe in a standard. When the time comes, if their children are autistic as a result of their Tylenol use, I'm not saying they will be, if they are, what will happen is they will not have any accountability. They will look at their children and be like, yeah, that they were going to have autism anyway. Look, it happened, yada yada. There's this idea that autism is purely genetic, and that's not true. Because there are people who are autistic who have no autistic ancestry. Genetics might cause some autism. Genetics might increase your chances of having it, but it clearly isn't the end-all be-all. Same with ADHD. These disorders, and maybe, here's what I'll say on that. On the idea that it could be purely genetic. We might be looking at two different disorders. This is entirely possible. I mean, the reclassification as everything as ASD, autism spectrum disorder, caused a lot of harm. It caused a lot of people to be diagnosed autistic who are not autistic. For all we know, we are looking at genetic autism, which is a set of disorders that cannot be cured because it is a genetic cause, and then another disorder that looks like, that mirrors autism, that in of itself is not autism, that is caused by carcinogens. For all we know, we're looking at two different disorders that are getting classified as the same because they have very similar symptoms, which likely is the case with autism anyway, as autism is a collection of different disorders all kind of meshed together because the DSM-5 is a total mess. But even if that is the true case, we're still not going to get any help, we're still not going to get any answers, and they're going to abandon it entirely. But that's pretty much all I've got. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this, and I will see you guys on the next one. And remember, we're fighting against evil here. We need to be stronger and better than them.